If I'm honest, I should have known better than to trust the warmth in my brother's invitation. Caleb's text had been all exclamation points and heart emojis. Please come. It won't be the same without you. Nora really wants to meet you properly. Properly. Like I'd been introduced once and failed some quiet exam. We'd driven 3 hours from our small place outside Albany, the kind of drive that's mostly trees and radio static and the kids asking for snacks you already gave them. My husband, Daniel, kept one hand on the wheel and hummed under his breath like the world was simple and soft. In the back seat, Maya read with her knees tucked up to her chest, and Theo counted exits like they were trophies. I told myself it was just nerves. Engagement parties can make people weird. Wealth can make people worse. And Caleb, my Caleb, had always been a little too eager to impress whoever he thought held the gate. The mansion in Westport looked like it had been designed to make ordinary people whisper. White stone. Symmetrical hedges. A driveway that curled like a question mark around a fountain. Theo pressed his face to the window. Is Uncle Caleb a movie star? No, I said, already feeling my stomach tighten. He works in finance. Daniel said nothing, but I caught the slight shift in his gaze as he took everything in, quiet and measuring. If only I knew what I was walking into. Our life wasn't flashy. It was good. I managed community partnerships for a regional nonprofit, long meetings, complicated grant timelines, the kind of work that looks gentle from the outside until you're juggling 7 different stakeholders and someone's funding vanishes overnight. Daniel taught writing workshops at the library and consulted, on the side, which was his vague way of saying he did projects for companies that needed someone to fix messy communication problems without making a show of it. We lived in a 100-year-old farmhouse we were slowly repairing with more optimism than cash. The floors creaked. The windows breathed cold in winter. The kids had a swing nailed to a maple tree out back that Daniel swore was perfectly safe, in the way husbands always swear things. Caleb was my only sibling. Younger by 4 years. Growing up, he'd been the bright, restless one, always scanning for the next door that might open wider than the last. Our mother used to say he had city hunger, like it was a kind of weather. He'd moved to Connecticut after college. Then he moved again, up and sideways, always. A new job, a better apartment, a circle of people whose clothes looked effortless and whose laughter sounded practiced. When he called last month to tell me he was engaged, I'd cried, because I wanted it for him. I wanted him loved. I wanted him safe. But the invitation came with a list of helpful details. Valet-only parking. Cocktail attire. Please arrive by 6:45 for photos. No gifts, contributions to the Westport Youth Scholars Fund preferred. When I read it, I felt 2 things at once: pride that my brother had built a life that could hold something like this, and a thin blade of worry that I didn't know where I fit inside it. I chose a navy dress that fit well and didn't beg for attention. I pinned on my grandmother's small pearl earrings, real pearls, modest and warm against my skin. Maya wore a pale green dress from a consignment store, the kind with a sturdy zipper and careful stitching. Theo wore khakis and a button-down he'd already wrinkled climbing into the car. Daniel put on his usual uniform when we went somewhere nice, a chambray shirt, dark slacks, and a brown blazer that had softened at the elbows. He looked like someone you'd ask for directions. He looked like someone you wouldn't notice twice. Except I did. Because when Daniel goes quiet, it doesn't mean he's absent. It means he's recording. We pulled up behind a line of cars that looked like they belonged in glossy magazines. A man in a black suit opened Daniel's door like we were royalty. Another took our keys before I could even say hello. Theo whispered, "Mom, are we allowed to be here?" "Yes," I said too quickly. Daniel brushed his thumb across my hand once, a small grounding touch. "We're fine," he murmured. But I had no idea what was coming next. The first thing I noticed was the light. The terrace glowed in warm gold, strings of Edison bulbs hung like fireflies trapped in perfect rows. Everything in that light looked expensive, even the ice in the glasses. People laughed with their whole mouths but not their eyes. A quartet played somewhere near the garden, the kind of music that makes you stand up straighter without realizing it. And then there was the other light. The light near the service corridor, cooler, paler, the kind of fluorescent spill that shows every flaw in a face. A woman with a clipboard intercepted us at the entrance. She was dressed in black with a headset and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Names? Lena Park, I said. This is my husband Daniel, and our children. We're here for Caleb Foster. Her pen paused. Her expression shifted, not quite rude, just adjusted. Like a thermostat. Ah. Yes. She scanned the list again. Right this way. We followed her through clusters of people who smelled like champagne and expensive perfume and something sharper, status, maybe, or the fear of losing it. I spotted Caleb near the center of the terrace, surrounded by a tight ring of guests. He looked polished. His hair was perfect. His suit fit like it had been tailored by someone who thought about power as a fabric. Beside him stood Nora. I'd only met Nora once, briefly, at a brunch where she'd asked me what I did and then smiled in a way that made it feel like she was putting my answer in a drawer labeled cute. Tonight, she wore a champagne-colored dress that caught the warm light and threw it back like a signal. I lifted my hand to wave. Caleb's eyes flicked toward me. For a second, his face softened, recognition, relief, something like home. Then his gaze shifted to the people around him. And I watched the softness leave. He didn't wave back. He didn't step away. He didn't even nod. The coordinator led us past the main bar, past the dance floor, past the tables with place cards and little vases of white roses. We moved like we were invisible, sliding along the edge of the party's attention. We ended up at a round table tucked near a set of double doors that opened into the kitchen corridor. Servers rushed through with trays, the music muffled by the wall. The warm terrace light didn't reach us. We sat in the cooler glow, like an afterthought. Enjoy, the coordinator said, already turning away. Daniel pulled out my chair like we were at a small restaurant and not a mansion that looked like it could swallow us whole. He helped Maya sit. He scooted Theo's chair in with gentle patience. Maya leaned toward me, her voice barely a breath. Mom, why are we back here? It's just logistics, I lied, smiling too brightly. The party's big. Theo craned his neck toward the terrace. Can we go say hi to Uncle Caleb? Soon, I promised. I looked across the room again. Caleb laughed at something someone said. He raised his glass. Nora's hand rested on his arm like a claim. He didn't look our way. A server passed us without stopping. Theo watched a tray of tiny appetizers float by like a mirage. I'm starving. I'll find something, I said, already standing. Daniel's hand caught my wrist lightly under the table. Not to stop me, just to steady me. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes tracked the room with an odd precision. Sit, he murmured. Let's see. Before I could ask what he meant, Nora appeared at our table like she'd been summoned by the scent of discomfort. Lena. Her voice was bright and practiced, pitched loud enough that the nearby table could hear. You made it. What a trek, right? Upstate is quite a drive. It was fine, I said evenly. She looked down at Maya. And this must be your daughter. So sweet. Her gaze skimmed Maya's dress. Very vintage. Maya's cheeks colored. And Theo. Nora crouched beside him, a smile pinned to her face. Are you excited? Theo nodded. Yeah. I like parties. Oh, good. Nora's eyes flicked toward the buffet under the warm lights. Just a heads up, honey, some of the food is very adult. Truffle things. Raw things. She laughed softly. Not everyone's little ones are used to that. Theo blinked. I like trying stuff. Nora patted his shoulder like he was a well-meaning puppy. We'll have the kitchen make something simple. I don't need, Theo started. We're fine, I cut in, my voice polite but firm. They can eat what everyone else eats. Nora's smile sharpened. Of course. I just worry about awkward moments. She glanced meaningfully toward the terrace, toward the people in warm light. Then she stood and, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, gestured to a couple nearby. Oh. You have to meet Lena. She's Caleb's sister. They live, very simply. A sweet little farmhouse life. Very grounded. The couple smiled in a way that felt like a closed door. I could feel the narrative forming around us without my consent. And that's when everything shifted. Because Daniel, quiet, harmless-looking Daniel, leaned forward slightly and said, pleasantly, Lena manages multi-million-dollar partnerships that keep entire communities afloat. If you ever want to understand real pressure, try building something that isn't about optics. His tone was gentle. His words were not. Nora's eyes flicked to him, surprised, just for a second, before she recovered. How inspiring, she said, as if he'd told a charming story about volunteering. And then she smiled wider, leaned in, and lowered her voice with a sweetness that felt like poison. Still, she murmured, this crowd can be particular. It's better if you don't take things personally. She straightened, patted my arm as if I were fragile, and floated away. Across the terrace, Caleb still didn't look at us. But I had no idea what was coming next. For a while, I tried to make our corner table feel like it belonged to us. I helped Theo fold his napkin into a lopsided triangle. I asked Maya about her book. I kept my smile in place like a shield. Every few minutes, I watched warm light glint off the champagne flutes in the center of the terrace. It made everything look softer than it was. Our light showed the truth. A server finally stopped long enough for me to ask about food. She glanced over my shoulder, toward the VIP section, like she was checking permission. Children's plates will come out, she said briskly. Later. Could they have some of the appetizers? I asked. Her eyes flicked to Theo, then back to me. Those are for, she stopped herself. They're circulating. She walked away. Theo slumped. Maya stared down at her hands, twisting her fingers in her lap. Daniel leaned back in his chair, angled slightly so he could see the whole party. To anyone else, he looked relaxed. Like a man taking in an event for later storytelling. I knew better. Daniel was paying attention in the way people pay attention right before they make a decision. Nora kept orbiting us. Each time she came close, she brought another polished little jab. Oh, your earrings are so charming, she said, her gaze flicking to my pearls. I love heirlooms. They're like history you can wear. Then, casually, not everyone can keep up with the current collections, of course. She spoke loudly enough that the women at the next table could hear. They laughed politely, eyes sliding away from mine. Later, she tilted her head at Daniel's blazer. Is that linen? Very practical. Daniel smiled. It keeps me warm. Oh, she said, as if warmth were a quaint hobby. Well, thank goodness. These houses can be drafty. Old money architecture, you know. The phrase, old money, landed like a stamp. Theo finally asked, loudly and innocently, Mom, why are we by the kitchen doors? A couple nearby glanced over. My throat tightened. Because it's quieter, I said, forcing brightness. And we can see everything. Theo looked toward the terrace. But we can't see Uncle Caleb. I stood so fast my chair scraped. I'm going to find him, I said. Daniel's hand touched my lower back, gentle pressure. Give it a moment, he murmured. I've given it, I know. His voice stayed calm. Just, look. He nodded subtly toward the terrace. Nora had drifted back to Caleb. She placed her hand on his arm and leaned close to his ear. Caleb's shoulders tightened. Then, like he'd been reminded of something unpleasant, he glanced in our direction for the first time in what felt like an hour. His eyes met mine. And then he looked away. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Like he'd been trained. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't a slap. It was worse. It was my brother choosing the warm light over us. I sat back down because I didn't know what else to do. Because I could already hear the story people would tell if I marched into the center of the terrace and demanded an explanation. She caused a scene. She couldn't handle it. She embarrassed him. I wasn't going to give Nora that gift. So I stayed quiet. I endured. And then Maya disappeared. Not dramatically. Not with a scream. Just an empty chair beside me when I turned to ask her a question. She went to the bathroom, Theo said, chewing the corner of his napkin. That was, a while ago, I said, my heart tightening. Daniel's gaze sharpened. How long? Theo shrugged. I don't know. 10 minutes? Maybe. I stood, scanning the crowd for Maya's dark hair. The terrace was a sea of heads and glittering earrings and expensive haircuts. I couldn't see her. I started walking toward the house. The hallway inside smelled like lilies and polish. The floors gleamed so much they didn't look real. I moved fast, past framed art that felt like it had never been touched by human hands. I found the bathroom corridor. And I found Maya. She was coming toward me slowly, shoulders hunched, arms folded tight across her stomach. Her eyes were red, and she blinked too quickly, like she was trying to outrun tears. Maya, I said, dropping to her level. Honey. What happened? She shook her head. Her jaw clenched, stubborn in a way that was pure me. Maya. I kept my voice soft. Tell me. Her words came out in a whisper that cut straight through me. Can we go home? My chest tightened painfully. What happened? She swallowed hard. 2 girls. They were by the sink. They looked at my shoes. She glanced down at her feet, simple flats, well-made, slightly worn at the toe. They said they looked poor. Her voice broke on the word. They asked if we got them from a donation bin. Something hot and bright surged behind my eyes. Before I could speak, heels clicked behind us, sharp and steady, like punctuation. Nora appeared at the mouth of the corridor, her expression already arranged into concern. Oh no. Her voice pitched louder than necessary. Is everything okay? I felt the hallway air shift. A couple of guests walked past slowly, pretending not to listen. We're fine, I said flatly. But Maya, with the raw honesty of a child, whispered, they made fun of my shoes. Nora's gaze dropped to Maya's flats. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in her face, satisfaction, quick and bright, like a match. Then she smoothed it away. Oh, sweetheart. She crouched. Kids can be cruel. But you have to understand, she glanced up at me, her smile delicate. The children here are raised differently. Their parents are leaders, investors, philanthropists. She said the words like they were a different species. They're being prepared for certain environments, she continued, voice gentle and deadly. And sometimes, when someone comes from a more simple background, it's a shock. For everyone. My fingers curled into fists. Nora looked at me with a softness that felt like judgment. Lena, I've been worried about this. Your kids aren't used to settings like this. It's not their fault. She paused, letting the hallway hang on her words. But maybe next time, she said, you could prepare them? Clothing, shoes, little details. It saves everyone discomfort. I felt my face go cold. She wasn't defending Maya. She was defending the cruelty. I wanted to say something sharp and true and humiliating back. But I saw the guests lingering, hungry for a moment to consume. I saw the trap. If I exploded, I'd be the spectacle. If I stayed quiet, my daughter would learn that humiliation is something you swallow. I looked at Maya's trembling mouth. And that's when everything shifted. Because I realized there wasn't a version of this evening where staying would keep her safe. Daniel appeared at the end of the corridor, silent as a shadow. He took in Maya's face, the red eyes, the tight shoulders. His expression didn't change, but the air around him did. It felt like pressure dropping before a storm. His gaze met mine, calm and cold and completely focused. He didn't speak the question out loud. But I heard it anyway. Have you had enough? I nodded. But I had no idea what was coming next. We walked back to our table in silence, Maya clinging to my hand like she was afraid the floor might tilt. Theo looked up the moment he saw her face. Maya? Are you okay? Maya shook her head once and sat down, eyes fixed on her lap. I drew a breath that felt like swallowing glass. We're leaving, I said quietly. Daniel didn't argue. He just helped Theo into his blazer with careful hands, then slipped Maya's cardigan over her shoulders like it mattered, like she mattered more than this entire glittering terrace. Nora followed us, of course. She appeared near the foyer as if she'd been waiting for the chance to perform. Oh, she said brightly, voice carrying, I think that's wise. It can be overwhelming for families who aren't used to this. Her gaze swept the foyer, catching the attention of nearby guests. A few turned, curious. Nora smiled wider. After all, we have to maintain an image tonight. For our partners. Our investors. Then she said it, the line that made her too comfortable in her power. This is our home, she declared, placing a hand on the marble banister like it belonged to her bloodstream. Caleb and I. We can't have awkward moments in our house. Our house. She said it again, slower. Our house. The foyer seemed to hold its breath. I saw a flicker cross Daniel's face. Not anger. Not surprise. Something closer to recognition. Like someone had just handed him the exact key he needed. He stopped walking. Nora blinked. Is there a problem? Daniel turned toward her with a polite, professional expression. The harmless man in the chambray shirt. The library workshop husband. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The gesture was casual. Unhurried. Like checking the weather. Actually, he said, voice calm enough to sound kind, before we go, I need to speak with Caleb. Nora's smile tightened. About what? Daniel's eyes stayed steady. About the house. The word dropped into the foyer like a stone. Nora's expression froze. Across the terrace, the quartet's music faltered for a beat, as if even the strings felt the tension. Daniel lifted his voice slightly, not loud, just certain. "Caleb," he called. "Can you come here for a moment? It's important." My brother emerged from a cluster of guests, confusion already creasing his forehead. He looked flushed, like he'd been running to keep up with a version of himself all night. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between me and Nora. "Lena, why are you leaving?" Nora stepped in instantly, hand to her chest. "It's nothing, babe. Lena's just uncomfortable. The kids are tired." "You know how." Daniel didn't look at her. He looked only at Caleb. "Do you remember the name on the lease?" Daniel asked. Caleb blinked. "The what?" And that's when everything shifted. Caleb laughed once, nervously. "Daniel, man, this is not the time." "It is," Daniel said gently. His tone held something I'd only heard on rare phone calls, when he thought he was alone in the backyard, voice low, words clipped, speaking like time itself was a contract. Caleb's eyes darted to Nora. She was very still now, champagne flute rigid in her hand. I don't know," Caleb admitted. "The agent handled it. Iron, something." Daniel nodded, as if that confirmed a detail he already knew. He tapped his screen, then turned the phone toward Caleb. "Read this," Daniel said. Out loud. Caleb frowned and leaned in. At first, his lips moved silently. Then his face changed, color draining in a slow wave. What is this?" he whispered. "Read it," Daniel repeated, patient and unyielding. Caleb swallowed. His voice came out shaky. Internal memo. Dated March 2021. From D. Park. Managing member. He looked up, eyes wide. "Daniel, keep going," Daniel said. Caleb's throat worked. Subject, foster housing adjustment. He stopped, breath catching. Approve rate lock for Caleb foster residence. Maintain 2021 lease rate for 36 months. Difference to be recorded under community stabilization account. The foyer went silent in a way that felt physical. I heard the faint clink of a glass somewhere. The distant hum of party chatter dying as people leaned closer, sensing drama like sharks sense blood. Nora's face had gone tight and pale. She stared at the phone as if it had insulted her. Daniel turned slightly, letting his voice carry just enough for the nearest guests. No shouting, no theatrics, just clarity. "It means," he said, "the market rate on this property has risen significantly. Caleb has been paying the locked rate from 3 years ago. The difference has been covered." Caleb staggered half a step. "Covered by who?" Daniel's gaze flicked to me for a moment, quiet reassurance, then back. "By my firm," Daniel said simply. "Because I asked them to. As a favor. For family." Nora's mouth opened, then shut. Caleb's eyes filled with something like panic. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." "I know," Daniel said, and there was real kindness in it. "That was the point. You were trying to build something you could be proud of. I didn't want you to feel like someone was holding you up." Nora recovered first. She straightened, voice sharp and bright. "This is incredibly inappropriate. You can't bring private business into our engagement party." Daniel nodded like she'd made a reasonable request. "You're right. Normally I wouldn't." He paused, then added, almost gently, "But you said this was your house." Nora's eyes flashed. Daniel's expression stayed pleasant. "Words matter." He turned back to Caleb. "Your lease term ends next month. The lock ends with it. I'm not threatening you," Caleb. I'm informing you, so you can make decisions with full information. Caleb's face crumpled. So what are you saying? That we're getting kicked out? No, Daniel said. I'm saying the next lease, if you renew, will be at market rate. Which you can afford if you live like yourself, not like the version of yourself you're performing tonight. Nora stepped forward, voice cold now. We have investors here. Daniel's eyes met hers. Then you should treat people like human beings even when you think they can't help you. The air felt electric. And in that charged silence, I felt something in me settle into place. Not vengeance. Clarity. This wasn't about humiliating my brother. It wasn't about winning the party. It was about choosing a line and holding it. I tightened my grip on Maya's hand and lifted my chin. Caleb, I said, my voice steady, I came here because you asked me to. Because I love you. But I won't let my children be treated like they're less than. Caleb blinked at me, tears pooling. Lena, I'm leaving, I said. Not because I'm ashamed. Because I'm done begging for basic respect. That was my plan in that moment, not to destroy, not to punish. To exit with my dignity intact. To let the truth stand on its own feet. Daniel reached for my hand, his thumb brushing my knuckles, our quiet signal, our anchor. And that's when everything shifted, I whispered to myself, because I could feel it. The power dynamic wasn't in Nora's lighting anymore. It was in our boundaries. The crowd didn't rush in to help Nora. They didn't comfort Caleb. They didn't lecture me about family. They did what wealthy crowds always do when the script breaks. They recalculated. People suddenly found their shoes fascinating. Someone coughed into their hand. A woman adjusted her bracelet like it was urgent. Nora's champagne flute trembled slightly, and I saw the smallest fracture in her composure. You're embarrassing us, she hissed, low enough to be intimate, loud enough to sting. I looked at her, really looked. Not at the dress. Not at the jewelry. Not at the practiced posture. At the part of her that had crouched beside my crying child and called cruelty refined standards. You embarrassed yourself, I said softly. Nora's eyes widened, offended, not because I was wrong, but because I'd dared to speak like I belonged in the same air. Caleb's voice broke. Lena. I didn't know they were, I know, I said, and I meant it. That's the problem. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Daniel stepped closer to Caleb, not aggressive, just present. You don't need this address to be worth something, he said quietly. You never did. Caleb's mouth trembled. I was just trying to, I know, Daniel repeated. But you can't build a life on borrowed approval. It will always collect interest. Nora's laugh came out sharp. Borrowed? Excuse me, Daniel turned his head toward her slowly. Nora, he said, polite, you asked for donations tonight. The Westport Youth Scholars Fund. Nora's chin lifted. Yes. It's important. Daniel nodded. It is. Which is why my firm is a primary sponsor. Nora blinked. Daniel's voice stayed calm. And because of what happened tonight, because my family was publicly demeaned in the name of your image, I'll be asking the board to redirect our pledge to a partner organization that aligns with our values. Nora's face went paper white. You can't, I can, Daniel said simply. It's not punishment. It's alignment. That was the soft revenge. Not a theatrical ruin. A quiet consequence, resources moving away from people who weaponize status. Caleb's eyes squeezed shut. Nora, why would you do that? He whispered. Nora's voice turned syrupy, frantic. I was trying to protect us. You don't understand how these people think, Caleb. One wrong impression and everything we've built. I repeated, unable to stop it. Nora's eyes snapped to me. I kept my voice even. Your impression was that my children were acceptable targets. Maya's fingers tightened around mine. I looked down at her shoes, the ones those girls had mocked. The flats that had carried her through school hallways and library aisles and rainy mornings without complaint. They're just shoes, Maya whispered, ashamed. I knelt beside her, right there in the foyer, in front of the marble and the flowers and the watching faces. No, I said. They're not just shoes. They're proof you walked into a room that tried to shrink you, and you're walking out with your head up. Maya's eyes filled again, but this time she didn't look broken. She looked seen. Theo tugged Daniel's sleeve. Are we going home now? Daniel smiled, gentle again. Yeah, buddy. We're going home. I stood and faced Caleb one last time. My brother looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, not because he'd been humiliated, but because the illusion he'd been living in had cracked. I love you, I said quietly. When you're ready to be real with me, really real, I'll be here. Caleb's tears spilled. He nodded, once. Nora's mouth tightened, rage simmering beneath panic. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just took my hand and led us toward the door as if leaving a room was the most normal thing in the world. Behind us, the warm terrace light kept glowing. But it couldn't reach us anymore. And for the first time all night, I breathed like my lungs belonged to me. But I had no idea what the kids would say next, what this night would become in their minds, until we were already outside, the cold air clean against our faces. The valet brought our car around, our practical, slightly dusty SUV wedged between vehicles that looked sculpted rather than driven. The moment the doors shut, the quiet hit us like a blanket. Maya exhaled first, a shaky sound that turned into a small laugh. That was weird. Theo bounced in his seat. Dad, you were like, calm scary. Daniel chuckled, starting the engine. Calm isn't scary. It's just clear. We pulled away from the mansion, the fountain shrinking behind us. Through the rear window, the house still glowed, warm and golden, like nothing had happened. But something had. Maya's voice came small again. Are we poor? I twisted in my seat to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was thoughtful, not bitter. No, I said. And even if we were, it wouldn't mean you deserve less respect. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Wealth isn't the same as worth, he said gently. And class isn't something you buy. It's something you practice. Maya looked down at her shoes, then back up. So, my shoes are okay? I reached back and squeezed her knee. Your shoes are perfect, I said. They take you where you need to go. As the road darkened and the trees thickened, the air changed, less perfume, more earth. The kind of darkness that doesn't feel like a threat. The kind that feels like home. Daniel's hand found mine over the center console. No speech. No victory lap. Just the quiet truth of us. And if only I knew what I was walking into. I also didn't know how good it would feel to walk out. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.